The champagne flute trembles in her hand, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead, and Laura knows. She knows with the kind of certainty that burns through your chest and settles heavy in your stomach, that the woman across the marble floor has just recognized her. Mrs. Choi's mouth opens slightly, her eyes widening, with something that looks like horror and confusion twisted together, and Laura watches the color drain from that perfectly made-up face, as if someone pulled a plug. The gala music swells around them, violins and cellos weaving through conversations about investments and summer homes. But all Laura can hear is the rushing sound in her own ears, the panic rising like floodwater. "Do you even know who she is?" someone whispers, loud enough to cut through the noise, and Laura sees Mrs. Choi's hand fly to her throat, her diamond bracelet catching the light as her fingers curl into a fist against her collarbone. The woman who has spent 6 months ordering her around, treating her like furniture, calling her the help, with that particular sneer reserved for people deemed beneath notice. That woman is staring at her now like she's seeing a ghost, or maybe something worse. Laura takes a step forward in her Valentino gown, the one that costs more than most people make in a year, the deep emerald silk pooling around her feet like water, and she watches Mrs. Choi's face crumble with the realization that nothing she thought was true actually was. The room seems to tilt, just slightly, and Laura wonders if this is what drowning feels like. This pressure in her chest, this inability to breathe properly, this sense that everything is about to change and there's no going back. 6 months. 6 months of scrubbing floors and biting her tongue and watching this woman parade her cruelty like a designer handbag. 6 months of playing invisible while collecting evidence, building a case, waiting for this exact moment. But now that it's here, now that Mrs. Choi's world is splintering apart in real time, Laura feels something unexpected twist through her chest. Not satisfied, not even triumph, just this terrible, hollow ache. "Karen?" Mrs. Choi breathes, using the name Laura gave her, the fake identity she wore like armor, and then her eyes dart around the room as if searching for an explanation, for someone to tell her this isn't happening. "What are you... how did you..." Laura opens her mouth to answer, but before she can speak, the memory crashes over her like a wave. 6 months earlier, standing in the Seoul train station with a single suitcase and a mission she couldn't tell anyone about, her reflection in the glass looking back at her like a stranger. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV, where we explore love that breaks boundaries and hearts that refuse to be contained by expectations. If stories of courage, identity, and connection speak to you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. These stories need voices like yours. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The rain hammered against the train station windows that first day in Seoul, and Laura pressed her palm against the cold glass, watching her reflection waver in the droplets racing down the surface. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The arrival, the interview, the carefully constructed lie about who she was and why she needed this job. But standing here now with the weight of her real identity pressing down on her shoulders, and the knowledge that she was about to voluntarily walk into the home of the woman she'd been investigating for months, Laura felt something close to terror. "You don't have to do this," her handler had said 3 weeks earlier, sitting across from her in that sterile conference room in Lagos, the files spread between them like accusations. "We can find another way, another angle." But there wasn't another way. Not really. The Choi family's network was too sophisticated, their operation too clean from the outside. Someone had to get inside. Someone had to see what happened behind those gates, inside that mansion where Seoul's elite gathered to discuss business over imported wine and carefully maintained appearances. And Laura was the only agent with the right combination of skills. Fluent Korean from her mother's side, impeccable references that could withstand scrutiny, and the kind of face that people like Mrs. Choi looked through rather than at. "I can do this," Laura had said, and she meant it. She still meant it, even as her hands shook slightly, arranging the modest clothes she'd packed, the ones that screamed domestic worker rather than senior financial investigator for Interpol. The Choi mansion rose above the Han River like something from a different world, all glass and steel and old money confidence. Laura stood at the service entrance with her suitcase, rain dripping from her cheap umbrella, and pressed the buzzer. The intercom crackled. "Name and purpose," a flat voice demanded in Korean. "Karen Okonkwo? I'm here for the housekeeping position." The gate buzzed open without further comment, and Laura stepped into the life she would wear like a costume for however long this took. Mrs. Choi appeared in the kitchen doorway 3 hours later, her silk blouse probably worth more than the monthly salary she'd agreed to pay Laura. She looked at her the way you might examine a piece of furniture, assessing quality and value with quick, efficient eyes. "You speak Korean well for a Nigerian," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Your references say you worked in Lagos for a diplomat's family. Why leave?" Laura had prepared for this. "The family relocated to Brussels. They offered to take me, but—" She let her voice trail off, injecting just the right amount of longing. "I wanted to try something new. Korea feels like it could be home." Mrs. Choi's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Home." She said the word like it was foreign to her, or maybe amusing. "This is not your home, Karen. This is a job. You'll work 6 days a week, 8 to 8. Sundays you have free unless we're hosting, in which case you'll be compensated. You'll eat after the family eats, sleep in the staff quarters, and you will be invisible when guests are present." Invisible means silent. It means you don't look, don't listen, don't remember. Do you understand? "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Mrs. Choi turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Karen, I go through 5 or 6 housekeepers a year. They always think they can handle the expectations, and they're always wrong. I wonder which category you'll fall into." Laura watched her glide away, every movement calculated for maximum grace, and thought, "Neither. I'm going to be the one you never see coming." The first month was a study in cruelty disguised as standards. Mrs. Choi found fault with everything: the way Laura folded the spools, the angle of the vacuum lines on the carpet, the temperature of the tea she served during afternoon gatherings. But it wasn't really about the work. Laura had been a housekeeper before, during an undercover assignment in London, and she knew quality service when she provided it. No, this was about power, about Mrs. Choi's need to remind someone, anyone, that she stood at the top of a hierarchy and they stood at the bottom. "My mother-in-law is coming for dinner tonight," Mrs. Choi announced one Thursday morning, her voice sharp with stress. "Everything must be perfect. Everything. If you embarrass me in front of her, you're gone. Understand?" Laura nodded, keeping her eyes down, playing the role. But inside she was cataloging, the way Mrs. Choi's hands trembled slightly when she mentioned her mother-in-law, the tension that crept into her shoulders, the fear underneath the command. This was someone who lorded power over those beneath her because she had so little control over those above. The dinner was at the theater. Mrs. Choi's mother-in-law, a woman who made her daughter-in-law look warm by comparison, held court at the head of the table, while Mr. Choi, quiet, awkward, clearly uncomfortable, pushed food around his plate. Laura served in silence, invisible as instructed, but she was watching, always watching. The way Mr. Choi's eyes followed his wife with something that looked like resignation. The way Mrs. Choi's smile never reached her eyes. The way they all performed their roles as if happiness was a script they'd memorized, but never believed. "Who is your maid?" the mother-in-law asked suddenly, her gaze landing on Laura like a laser. "She's African." "Nigerian," Mrs. Choi corrected, her voice tight. Her references were impeccable. The older woman's skepticism hung in the air. "Well, I suppose we must be open-minded in this modern age, even if it means lowering standards." Laura felt the insult slide off her like water. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. But she watched Mrs. Choi's face flush with embarrassment, watched her absorb that casual racism like a blow, and for just a moment, just one brief, disorienting moment, Laura almost felt sorry for her. The feeling didn't last. That night, after the guests left, Mrs. Choi found Laura in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. "You were too slow with the wine refills," she hissed, her composure finally cracking. "My mother-in-law noticed. She always notices, and now I'll hear about it for weeks. Weeks." She grabbed a glass from Laura's hand, inspected it under the light, then hurled it against the floor, where it shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. "Clean that up, and tomorrow you'll work faster, or you'll work somewhere else." Laura knelt to collect the shards, her hands steady even as her pulse hammered. This was good. This was exactly the kind of behavior she needed to document, the kind of thing that revealed character, that showed the rot underneath the polished surface. She was building a profile, not just of financial crimes, but of the person willing to commit them. Because when it came time to present evidence, when it came time to convince a jury that someone was capable of fraud and money laundering and exploitation, you needed more than numbers. You needed to show them who that person really was. The breakthrough came in month 3, during a party the Schwas hosted for Seoul's art world elite. Laura was serving canapes, moving through the crowd like a ghost, when she overheard Mr. Choi talking with another man near the study door. "The gallery opening is next month," Mr. Choi said, his voice low. "The pieces are already in transit, Hong Kong to Busan, then here." "And customs?" the other man asked. "Handled. We have people." Laura's pulse quickened. This was it. The art smuggling operation her team had suspected, but couldn't prove. She needed to get into that study, needed to find documentation, needed to... "You." Mrs. Choi's voice cut through her thoughts. "More champagne. Now." Laura moved automatically, but her mind was racing. The study. Tonight. After everyone left. She waited until 2 in the morning, until the house settled into silence, before slipping out of her quarters. The study lock was simple. She had it open in 30 seconds. Inside, moonlight filtered through the windows, casting shadows across Mr. Choi's desk. Laura pulled out her phone, activated the camera, and started photographing everything. Invoices, shipping manifests, bank statements, email printouts showing communication with galleries in 6 different countries, all using coded language that wouldn't mean anything to someone who didn't know what they were looking for. But Laura knew. She knew exactly what she was looking at. "I wondered when you'd finally make your move." Laura spun around, her heart slamming into her throat. Mrs. Choi stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, her silk robe drawn tight around her waist. But her expression wasn't shocking. It was something else entirely, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Laura's mind raced, searching for an explanation, an excuse, anything. "Save it." Mrs. Choi stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "I've known what you were since day 1. Well, not exactly day 1. Day 3, maybe. You're too good at this job, Karen. Or should I call you by your real name? Laura Park, Senior Investigator for Interpol's Financial Crimes Division. Mother Korean, father Nigerian. Top of your class at Quantico. Quite the impressive resume." The world tilted. Laura's hand instinctively moved toward the phone in her pocket, the panic button that would bring her back up. But Mrs. Choi laughed, a sound without humor. "Please, if I wanted you arrested or hurt, you'd already be gone. I've had security following your every move for months." She moved to the window, gazing out at the Seoul skyline. "The real question is why I let you keep playing your little game." "Then why?" Laura forced the words out, her voice steadier than she felt. Mrs. Choi turned, and in the moonlight, her face looked different. Older, tired. "Because I'm going to offer you something, Laura. A trade. Your investigation is mine." "I don't understand." "My husband is guilty of everything you think he is. The smuggling, the money laundering, the fraud, but I'm not." She moved closer, her eyes intense. "I've been trapped in this marriage for 8 years, watching him build his little empire on other people's backs, knowing that if I left, if I spoke up, I'd be destroyed. His family has connections that go all the way to the Blue House. I'd be ruined before I could finish testifying." Laura's mind spun. "You want to turn on him." "I want my life back." Mrs. Choi's voice cracked slightly. I want out of this cage, and you, Laura Park, are going to be my exit strategy. In exchange for what? Everything, every file, every contact, every detail of his operation. But more than that, she hesitated, something vulnerable crossing her face. I need you to understand. I need someone to know that I'm not like him, that I never wanted this. Laura stared at her, years of training warring with something else, something more human. The way you treat people, your staff, me, that wasn't some act. No, Mrs. Choi's voice went flat. That was survival. When you're a woman in this world, when you marry into a family like the Choi's, you learn quickly that kindness is weakness, that empathy is a liability. So you become what they expect. You become hard. She looked away. Sometimes you become hard enough that you forget how to be anything else. The confession hung between them, raw and uncomfortable. Laura thought about the files she'd seen tonight, the evidence she'd been collecting. Thought about the woman standing before her now, stripped of her usual armor, looking almost human. I can't promise you anything, Laura said finally. If you're complicit, I'll take my chances in court, with your testimony about what you've witnessed here, about how I helped you. Mrs. Choi pulled out a USB drive from her pocket. This contains everything: bank accounts in the Caymans, shell companies in Panama, the names of everyone in his network. Take it. Build your case. But when it goes to trial, remember that I gave you this. Remember that I chose to do the right thing, even if I took too long to choose it. Laura reached for the drive, their fingers brushing briefly. What happens now? Now? Mrs. Choi smiled, and for the first time it looked almost genuine. Now we pretend nothing has changed. You keep playing the maid, I keep playing the ice queen. And in 4 weeks, at the annual charity gala that my mother-in-law insists we host, you'll make your grand entrance and blow this whole thing wide open. Consider it theater. Consider it justice. She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Laura? That gala. You should wear something stunning, something that makes them all realize how blind they've been. Then she was gone, leaving Laura alone in the study with a USB drive that could destroy lives and a head full of questions she didn't know how to answer. If you're still with us on this journey, we're grateful. Stories like these about women finding their power, about justice and redemption, about the complicated truth of human nature. These are the stories we tell at Afro-Korean Stories TV. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments what you think of Laura and Mrs. Choi's alliance. Now, back to the story that's about to explode. The next 4 weeks were the strangest of Laura's life. By day, she played her role: the invisible maid, the silent servant, the woman people looked through rather than at. But now, every interaction with Mrs. Choi carried double meaning. Every sharp word contained a hidden message. Every criticism was covered for their secret alliance. They were two actresses on a stage, performing for an audience that didn't know they were watching a show. Laura used the time to verify everything on the USB drive. She met with her handler 3 times, always at different locations, always cautious. The evidence was damning, more than damning. It was comprehensive. Choi had been running his operation for over a decade, moving millions through fake art sales, using his gallery connections to legitimize dirty money from sources that ranged from organized crime to corrupt politicians. And you trust her? Her handler asked during their 3rd meeting, his skepticism clear. Mrs. Choi, the woman who's been covering for him all these years? I don't know, Laura admitted, but the evidence doesn't lie, and she's giving us everything we need to bring down the entire network, not just her husband. Or she's setting you up, using you to eliminate competition, to take over the operation herself. Laura had considered that, spent hours considering it. Then we bring her down too, but I don't think that's what this is. I think she's telling the truth. You think? Laura, think doesn't hold up in court. Think doesn't protect you when things go sideways. But Laura was already in too deep to back out now. She'd seen too much, learned too much, and somewhere along the way, her mission had shifted from gathering evidence to something more complicated. She wanted to understand Mrs. Choi, wanted to know how someone became that hard, that cold, that willing to perform cruelty to protect themselves? The answer came 2 weeks before the gala. Laura was cleaning Mrs. Choi's bedroom, a task she usually handled quickly, when she found the photographs hidden in the back of a drawer. They showed a younger woman, maybe 22 or 23, with Mrs. Choi's face but softer eyes. She was laughing in most of them, her arms around friends, her expression open and unguarded. In one photo, she stood next to a young man who wasn't Mr. Choi, their foreheads pressed together, looking at each other like they contained whole universes. His name was Junho. Laura jumped, spinning to find Mrs. Choi in the doorway. She wasn't angry, just tired. "We were going to get married," Mrs. Choi continued, moving into the room. "Run away to Jeju Island and open a small art gallery. Something simple. Something of ours." She took one of the photographs from Laura's hand, studying it like an artifact from someone else's life. "But my family had other plans. The Choi wanted a connection to political power, and my father wanted business security. So they arranged the marriage, and I was informed I would comply or be disowned." "What happened to Junho?" "I don't know. I cut him off completely. Married Mr. Choi 6 months later." She set the photograph down. "I told myself I was being practical, that love was a luxury I couldn't afford, that I'd learn to be content." Her laugh was bitter. "Instead, I learned to be cruel. Easier to hurt others than to sit with your own pain. You know?" Laura did know. She'd seen it before. People who armored themselves so thoroughly that they forgot how to take the armor off. "Is that why you're doing this? Help me? Some kind of redemption?" "Maybe." Mrs. Choi met her eyes. "Or maybe I'm just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being this person." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "The gala invitation I sent you 3 months ago, the one I meant as a joke, as a way to mock you in front of Seoul's elite, wear the dress I'm having sent to your quarters tomorrow. It's a Valentino, emerald green. It costs more than most people make in 5 years." She smiled, sharp and fierce. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." The dress arrived the next day, along with shoes, jewelry, and a note in Mrs. Choi's handwriting, for the grand finale. Laura spent the following week finalizing everything. Her backup team would be positioned around the gala venue. Prosecutors were on standby with warrants. Media contacts were alerted that something significant would break that night. Everything was in place. Everything was ready. Except Laura's heart, which kept doing this strange, stuttering thing whenever she thought about what was about to happen. About the lives that would shatter. About Mrs. Choi, who would trade one cage for another, albeit one with the possibility of eventual freedom. The night before the gala, Laura found a letter slipped under her door. Mrs. Choi's handwriting again, but shakier this time. "Laura, I'm terrified, absolutely paralyzed with fear. Part of me wants to run, to disappear, to stay in the cage I know rather than risk the unknown. But I keep thinking about those photographs you found, about the girl I used to be before I learned to perform cruelty. I don't know if I can be her again. I don't know if she even exists anymore. But I'd like to try. I'd like to at least try. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing past what I made myself become. Tomorrow, we will tell the truth. Whatever happens after that, at least we'll have done that much. YJ." Laura read the letter 3 times, then burned it in the sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. The initials surprised her. In 6 months, she'd never known Mrs. Choi's given name. YJ Yeonjin, probably. Or Yoojin. A reminder that behind the Ice Queen mask was an actual person, with an actual name, and an actual history of pain. The next day moved in slow motion. Laura prepared methodically, the way she always did before major operations, checked her equipment, confirmed team positions, reviewed the plan for the 100th time. But her hands shook slightly as she put on the dress that evening, as she fastened the diamond earrings Mrs. Choi had sent, as she stared at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The car misses. Choi arranged picked her up at 7. The driver didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just drove through Seoul's glittering streets toward the venue. Laura watched the city slide past and thought about all the nights she'd spent scrubbing floors in the Choi mansion, all the insults she'd absorbed, all the cruelty she'd witnessed. Tonight, it would mean something. Tonight, it would matter. The gala was already in full swing when she arrived. Through the car window, she could see Seoul's elite gathered in their designer clothes, sipping champagne, performing wealth and status like it was an Olympic sport. Laura took a breath, steadied herself, and opened the car door. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal cutting through the string quartet's melody. Laura walked up the steps in her Valentino gown, and she could feel their shock, their confusion, their desperate attempt to reconcile the maid they'd ignored with this woman ascending toward them like a queen. Mrs. Choi stood near the entrance, frozen in place, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. Their eyes met across the space, and Laura saw everything there. Fear and determination, and regret and hope all tangled together. "Do you even know who she is?" someone whispered, loud enough to carry. Mrs. Choi's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "Karen," she breathed, using the fake name, and Laura heard the question underneath. "Are we really doing this?" Laura walked up to her, close enough that only Mrs. Choi could hear. "Your husband is here?" "Inside, with his investors." "Then let's finish this." But before they could move, a voice cut through the crowd. Well, this is unexpected." Laura turned to see a man she recognized from the files, Park Min-jun, one of Mr. Choi's major partners in the smuggling operation. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold. "Mr. Choi, you didn't mention your maid would be attending as a guest. How democratic of you." "She's not—" Mrs. Choi started, but Laura cut her off. "I'm exactly what I appear to be," Laura said, her voice carrying across the space. "Someone who's been watching very carefully. Someone who's seen everything." Min-jun's smile faltered. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything." Laura pulled out her badge, watching the blood drain from his face. "I'm stating facts. Laura Park, Interpol Financial Crimes Division, and you, Mr. Park, are under arrest for art smuggling, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The crowd erupted. People pushed backward, forward, voices rising in confusion and shock. Mrs. Choi grabbed Laura's arm. "Now? Here?" "Now? Here." Laura nodded to her team, who materialized from the crowd with practiced efficiency. "Where's your husband?" But Mr. Choi was already running, pushing through the crowd toward a side exit. Laura moved to follow, but someone grabbed her shoulder, hard. She spun to find herself facing a man she didn't recognize, his grip painful, his expression murderous. "You've made a mistake," he growled in Korean, "a very big mistake." Then Mrs. Choi was there, slamming her champagne flute into the side of his head with enough force to stagger him. "Don't you touch her!" The man stumbled backward, and Laura used the moment to break free, sprinting after Mr. Choi. She caught him near the service entrance, tackling him to the ground with moves she'd learned in training. He struggled, shouting something about lawyers and connections and consequences, but Laura already had their handcuffs out. "You're done," she said, locking them around his wrists. "The accounts are frozen, the network is compromised, and your wife gave us everything." His face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Yeonjin? She would never—" "She already did." Laura hauled him to his feet and passed him off to her backup. Then she turned back to the gala, to the chaos spreading through the venue as more arrests were made, as Seoul's elite realized they'd been caught. Mrs. Choi, Yeonjin, stood alone in the center of the room, still holding the broken champagne flute, looking shell-shocked. Laura walked back to her, acutely aware of the cameras now filming everything, of the moment crystallizing into something that would define both their lives. "Are you all right?" Laura asked quietly. Yeonjin looked at her, and for the first time in 6 months, Laura saw actual tears in her eyes. "I don't know. Ask me in a year, maybe 5. She dropped the broken glass, wincing as a small cut on her palm began to bleed. "Will I go to prison?" "That's not my call. But you cooperated. You provided evidence. That means something." Laura pulled out a handkerchief, wrapping it around Yeonjin's hand. "It doesn't erase what you did before, the cruelty, the complicity, But it's a start. A start, Yeonjin repeated, like she was testing the word. I don't even know what I'm starting toward. Neither do I, Laura admitted, but at least you get to find out. That's more than a lot of people have. They stood there for a moment, two women who'd spent 6 months playing elaborate roles for each other, now stripped down to something more honest, something more real. I'm sorry, Yeonjin said suddenly, for how I treated you, for the things I said. I know it was a strategy. I know it was a cover. But that doesn't make it acceptable. You deserved better than that. Laura thought about saying it was fine. It was part of the job. It didn't matter. But none of that was true. It mattered. It hurt. So instead she said, "Thank you for apologizing, and thank you for choosing to do the right thing, even though it cost you everything." Yeonjin laughed, but it wasn't bitter this time, just sad. Everything I had was already a lie. At least now I have a chance at something real. The prosecutors arrived to take Yeonjin's formal statement. Laura watched her walk away, shoulders straight despite everything, and felt that strange ache in her chest again. Not satisfied, not triumph. Just this recognition that justice was complicated, that people were complicated, that sometimes the right thing still felt like loss. Her handler appeared at her elbow. "Hell of a bust, Park. The arrests tonight will take down half the art smuggling operations in East Asia." "Yeah." Laura watched as they led Mr. Choi out in handcuffs, his face a mask of impotent rage. Hell of a bust. "You did good work. Going undercover for 6 months, maintaining your cover that whole time? That takes real commitment." Or real stubbornness. Laura smiled slightly. Probably both. "So what now? Are you heading back to Lagos?" Laura thought about it. Her apartment there, the life she'd built, the cases waiting for her attention. But she also thought about Yeonjin's face when she apologized, about the photographs of the girl who used to laugh openly, about the possibility of redemption even after years of cruelty. "I think I'll stick around to Seoul for a bit. Make sure the trial goes smoothly. Make sure certain testimonies get heard properly." Her handler studied her. "You know she's probably still facing charges, right? Is your friend there?" "She's not my friend," Laura said automatically. Then, more honestly, "But maybe she could be, eventually, after everything settles, after she pays for what she needs to pay for." She turned away from the chaos, suddenly exhausted. People can change. They can choose differently. I have to believe that, or this job would kill me. The trial took 8 months. Laura testified 3 times, detailing everything she'd witnessed in the Choi household. The prosecutors painted a picture of systematic fraud, of exploitation, of a network that had operated with impunity for over a decade. Mr. Choi got 15 years. His associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 12. The art world in Seoul went through a reckoning, with galleries closing and reputations destroyed. Yeonjin cooperated fully, providing testimony that helped secure convictions across the network. In exchange, she received a suspended sentence and 5 years probation. Not freedom exactly, but a chance at it. Laura saw her one more time, 6 months after the gala, at a small coffee shop near the Han River. Yeonjin looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes simpler, her face bare of the armor she used to wear. "I heard you're opening a gallery," Laura said, stirring sugar into her tea, "in Jeju." "A small one, nothing fancy." Yeonjin smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I'm trying to remember what I wanted before I learned to want what I was supposed to want. It's harder than I thought it would be." "Most worthwhile things are. Are you going back to Lagos?" "Eventually, but I've been offered a position here, leading the Seoul office for financial crimes investigation." Laura hesitated. "I keep thinking about that night, about everything that happened, about whether we did the right thing." "We did the right thing," Yeonjin said firmly. "It wasn't clean, it wasn't simple, but it was right." She reached across the table, squeezed Laura's hand briefly. "Thank you for seeing me, for giving me a chance to be better than I was." "Thank you for taking it." Laura squeezed back, then let go. I should go. I have a case review in an hour. Laura? Yeonjin called as she stood to leave. If you're ever in Jeju, come visit. I'd like to show you what starting over actually looks like. Laura nodded, something warm spreading through her chest. Not satisfied, not triumph. Just this quiet recognition that sometimes justice looked like second chances. Sometimes it looked like two women sitting in a coffee shop, no longer performing for anyone, just being honest with each other about how hard it was to change, to grow, to become something better than what survival had made them. She walked out into Seoul's bright afternoon, the Han River glittering in the distance, and thought about all the investigations waiting for her, all the people who needed someone to see past their masks to the crimes underneath, all the evidence she would gather, all the cases she would build, all the truths she would uncover. But she also thought about Yeonjin's smile, genuine this time, about the gallery in Jeju, about redemption earned through years of difficult choice, about the possibility that people could surprise you, could choose differently, could become more than their worst moments. The city moved around her in its endless rhythm, oblivious to the small moment that had just passed. But Laura carried it with her anyway, this knowledge that sometimes the right thing didn't feel like victory. Sometimes it just felt like hope. Messy, complicated, hard-won hope. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. 3 years later, Laura stood in a small gallery in Jeju, looking at a painting of two women in evening gowns. One wore emerald green, the other midnight blue, and they faced each other across a crowded room with expressions that held everything: fear and determination and the fragile beginning of trust. I call it the hidden heiress, Yeonjin said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. Though I suppose that's not quite accurate. You were never hidden. You were right there the whole time, and we just chose not to see you. Until we couldn't look away anymore, Laura added, accepting the glass. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching visitors move through the gallery, studying Yeonjin's work with serious expressions. Do you ever regret it? Yeonjin asked quietly. Everything that happened? Laura thought about it, really thought about it. The 6 months of humiliation, the danger, the complicated, messy aftermath. The lives were destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed again before finding new shapes. No, she said finally, I don't regret it. Neither do I. Yeonjin smiled, raising her glass. To second chances. To tell the truth, Laura countered. To both. They clinked glasses, 2 women who'd found each other across an impossible divide, who'd torn down empires and rebuilt lives from the rubble. And in the painting behind them, their past selves faced each other forever, caught in that moment before everything changed, when the world was about to crack open and reveal all its hidden truths. The cost had been high. The consequences were permanent. But standing here now, in this gallery that existed because someone chose courage over comfort, because someone chose truth over performance, Laura thought maybe that was the point. Maybe that was the entire point. Not the happy ending, not the neat resolution, just the choice itself. The moment when you decide who you're going to be, and then you become it, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful, no matter what it costs. Because in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. Not power, not status, not appearances, just character. Just the choices you made when everything was on the line. Just the truth. Thank you for journeying with us through Laura and Yeonjin's story. Here at Afro-Korean Stories TV, we believe love and justice both require courage, the courage to see clearly, to act righteously, and to become better than our circumstances tried to make us. If this story moved you, please subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and join us for more stories that celebrate transformation, redemption, and the complicated beauty of human connection. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. Until next time, remember, character reveals everything.